Okay, so let's get started. Welcome everyone. We're here today for our webinar about paid sick leave, paid family leave, unemployment insurance for early childhood directors, staff, and family childcare programs in California. Welcome everyone. We have the pleasure to have a group of experts here to share some information about these topics today. We received over 500 questions from participants, and our goal is to answer those questions through this presentation. And if we have time at the end, we'll address a few other questions that were not included. Today, we have Sharon Thurman, who is the Director of the Work and Family Program and Senior Staff Attorney at Legal Aid at Work. We have Patty Prunhuber, Senior Policy Attorney at the Childcare Law Center, and Sarah Crow, a Managing Director of the Child 5 Center Children's Policy. And I am the Executive Director of Early Edge California. My name is Patricia Lozano, and we're happy to host this webinar. So I will pass it to Patty and Sharon. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much, Patricia, and to Early Edge California for hosting this webinar and inviting me to present today. For those of you who don't know, Legal Aid at Work is a nonprofit legal advocacy organization that protects and advances the rights of low-wage workers and their families. I'm really happy to be here with all of you today to share information about paid leave and unemployment benefits for childcare providers. I want to start by saying thank you to all of you for the essential work that you do every day. The work you do is so critical and especially important during this crisis. As we all know, this is a very difficult time for so many people. Record numbers of people are out of work because their places of employment have closed. Others can't work because they're ill, or because they need to care for a loved one who's ill, or because they need to care for children whose schools and places of care have closed. Those who still have jobs are facing very difficult choices every day between keeping their paychecks and staying safe and healthy. So today we're going to talk about some of the benefits available to help people weather this crisis. Patty and I will go back and forth throughout the presentation, and I will start by giving a general overview of unemployment insurance. So unemployment insurance is a program that provides temporary partial wage replacement for people who are unemployed or underemployed through no fault of their own. In California, people can receive benefits for up to 26 weeks. Under a new federal law that we'll talk more about in a moment, the duration can be extended for another 13 weeks for a total of 39 weeks. The benefits are between $40 and $450 per week. And we'll talk more in a moment about a new federal law that actually adds a $600 boost per week to everyone receiving unemployment benefits. Your benefits are determined based on how much you earned during a particular base period, which is a period in the recent past, usually between 5 and 18 months before you make your claim. And it's important to note that you do need to be authorized to work during the time that you are earning those base period earnings, and also during the time that you are collecting unemployment. So when we talk about no fault, right, people who are unemployed through no fault of their own, what that means, it actually can mean a number of different kinds of situations. So one, of course, is a layoff. It could be a furlough. It could be that there's just no work for you to do. It could also mean that your hours are reduced. So those certainly qualify for unemployment insurance. But terminations can also qualify. So if you have been terminated, as long as you weren't terminated for misconduct or for cause, then you will also be entitled to unemployment insurance. And a lot of people don't realize this, but unemployment insurance can also be available if you leave your job voluntarily. So that has to be, though, only for a very good reason. So if you leave your job, for example, because your children's school has closed and there's no other person to provide care for them, then that would be a good cause reason to quit your job. Also, a reasonable fear for your health and safety can be a good reason to quit your job. Generally, there is a requirement that you try to address whatever concern you have in the workplace, as long as there's a reasonable belief that that could potentially address the problem. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the process for applying for unemployment insurance. This benefit is administered by the California Employment Development Department. And there are a number of ways that you can apply for benefits. One way is through their website, and that is definitely the best way to apply for unemployment insurance. It's going to be the most efficient way. As you can imagine, the agency went from having record low unemployment claims to now having the highest number of unemployment claims in recorded history. And so they have really been trying very hard to staff up and to meet this need. But for those of you who maybe have been trying to reach the agency, it can be very difficult and very frustrating. So online is the best way to go, but that doesn't work for everybody. Of course, not everyone has access to the internet, and sometimes language access is not possible through online. And so you can also apply by mail, fax, or phone. If you are having a very difficult time reaching the Employment Development Department, or EDD, by phone, you can request to have your claim backdated to the moment when you were starting and trying to apply. And in that situation, we recommend that you take snapshots or screenshots of your phone logs, records essentially of your attempts to contact the agency so that you can get them to backdate your claim. Ordinarily, there is a 1-week waiting period for unemployment insurance benefits, but during the COVID-19 crisis, the agency and the governor have waived that 1-week waiting period. So, which means you can start getting benefits from the first week that you're out of work. But note that because of the record volume of claims, it's not going to, your money won't show up right away, right? Ordinarily, even in a good economy, with record low unemployment, it took the agency about 3 weeks to process claims, and given the volume of claims today, you should expect longer delays, unfortunately. You will need to continue to certify your eligibility for unemployment insurance while you're collecting benefits. And essentially, you need to be able and available to work. And you need to be, as I noted, in good immigration status, authorized to work in order to receive these benefits. Next slide, please. So fortunately, just a couple days ago, Governor Newsom announced the creation of a new disaster relief fund for undocumented workers. Because undocumented workers are such a critical portion of our workforce. They represent 10% of our workforce. They often are doing incredibly essential jobs. The governor recognized the need to address the need for benefits for this population. Unfortunately, it's not going to be enough, but it's a start, and we hope that the administration will build on this. So it's $125 million. The benefit will be $500 grants up to $1,000 per household. They will be available beginning in May and will be administered by community-based organizations. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk a little bit about new federal pandemic unemployment benefits that Congress passed recently through the CARES Act. I've alluded to a couple of these benefits already. So there are 3 main components I want to highlight, and I know that Patty will go into some more detail. The first is what I mentioned earlier, which is that you can now receive an extra 13 weeks of benefits under this law. So ordinarily it was 26 weeks. Now you can receive up to 39 weeks of benefits, and that will be through the end of this year. The second program I want to highlight is a brand new program that is designed for people who are not eligible for regular state unemployment insurance benefits. So this may be very helpful to many of you who are self-employed, run their own business, independent contractors. It also is intended to reach people who don't have a sufficient earnings in their base period, and workers at religious employers who traditionally have not been part of the unemployment insurance program. And this program you may have referred to, it's called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, or PUA. It's important to note that this program's application is not yet available. It's a brand new program, and so all the state agencies are having to ramp up and create new processes for these benefits. We learned this week from the Secretary of Labor that the application for these benefits will become available April 28th. And the agency is saying that benefit payments will be made available very shortly thereafter. As soon as you apply, they're saying the benefits will be sent within 24 to 48 hours. And this benefit covers people who might not ordinarily be covered by unemployment insurance, and also in terms of the reasons that they can collect unemployment insurance. So it also includes people who are sick with COVID-19, who are caring for other people who have COVID-19, and who are needing to care for children whose schools or places of care have closed because of COVID-19. And finally, the last piece that's really important that I alluded to earlier of this law is that everyone who is getting any form of unemployment benefits, whether it's under the regular state program or the pandemic program, will get an extra $600 per week. That is only available through the end of July of this year at this point, although there's hope maybe that Congress would extend it. The benefits have been already started paying those out, the extra $600, as of this week, and they will be retroactive to March 29th. And I'll turn it over to Patty now.
Thank you, Sharon. I just want to echo what Sharon said, is that we so appreciate the work you are all doing every day to take care of children, especially the children of essential workers who those workers could not go and keep us safe and fed and healthy without your caring for their children. So thank you. Many of you know the Childcare Law Center. I see many familiar names in the chat box, but the Childcare Law Center is dedicated to ensuring that all California children have access to good, affordable, and stable childcare so that they can thrive, and that those of you who provide that care have your work valued as very worthy work. So we're going to talk today about some immediate financial relief that might be available to you during such a difficult period, because it's both a public health crisis and an economic crisis for all of us, but especially you. And because the question has come up so many times in the chat box, I'll just mention this PowerPoint will be shared. We will send it out to everyone who is on this webinar, and we will work on trying to get it translated into Spanish. We are aware that that's a need. We want to talk a little bit about the administration of the pandemic unemployment assistance benefits. So as Sharon mentioned, the EDD will administer both the state and the federal benefit program. And the pandemic unemployment assistance application that will become available on April 28th is the one that family childcare providers should use, because they, for those of you who have already tried to apply and been told that your unemployment claim has 0 wages available, that's because you don't have any actual wages, you have self-employment income. The fact that you are not eligible for the state unemployment benefits does mean that you should apply for the pandemic unemployment assistance. I know that people have been going without money for a very long time. And by the time we're at April 28th, it will be, for many of you, almost 2 months. We're very concerned about that. The Secretary of Labor is saying there will be a very quick turnaround time on these applications, but I just want to put one cautionary note. Once you're approved for benefits, then you get what's called an EDD debit card, and that means that the Bank of America has to send you a card with your benefits that can be loaded on that card. So that's going to take another at least 5 days for them to be able to do that. On our website at childcarelaw.org, we have other resources available for short-term problems, and we talk about some eviction protections and utility shutoff protections. And we will encourage all of you to look at your local governments that are often providing local aid. So let's talk about, Sharon mentioned that you might have a way to backdate your claim if you're having difficulty getting to a claims representative or filing your claim. For the pandemic unemployment assistance, you don't need to make that case. If you can prove that you were out of work back to March 10th, then your benefits would go back to that week and would not be limited by the date that you filed, because everybody's recognizing there's no application yet that you can use. I want to make sure that people know that both licensed and license exempt providers can qualify for pandemic unemployment assistance. But as Sharon mentioned, undocumented individuals are not eligible for either the state or the federal unemployment programs. But there is some welcome news with the disaster relief fund that the governor has just announced. Okay, so family child care providers do qualify for pandemic unemployment assistance when, as a direct result of the pandemic of COVID-19, they either close their business or have a substantial interruption, a loss of income in business activity. I want to say that now that we have a stay-in-home order for the entire state, the question of whether you closed your business as a direct result of COVID-19 is decided. That EDD is going to assume that your business closed as a result of COVID-19 during this period when people are unable to leave their homes. When you look at a substantial interruption in business activity or partial unemployment, that could be where you used to have 12 children and now you have 3, or you have had an interruption where you closed and now you're reopened but at a reduced capacity. If you have suffered a loss of income that is significant, then you should apply for these benefits. And I think if there's one message to take from this, this webinar, it's apply. It is possible that you will have too much income, but at this point you want EDD to make that determination. And as mentioned before, what's going to happen is that anyone who applies with this new pandemic unemployment assistance application is going to self-certify. So they're going to say, I have had a substantial loss of income or I'm out of work completely. And based on that, they will get the minimum benefit, which is under the federal law is $167 in California, so $167 per week. And they'll also get the $600 per week supplement during that limited period. Next slide. So if you are open, but you are still serving fewer children, I mentioned you can get partial unemployment benefits. Now, in California, we use a benefit calculation, and you don't need to know this, but just to get a sense, where if, let's say, your income now is only $200 a week, you're going to disregard the greater of $25 or 25%. So you disregard a quarter of those $200 a week, and you'd be left with $150 a week, and that would cause a dollar for dollar reduction in your unemployment benefit based on the income that's left after the disregard. But remember that even qualifying for a very small unemployment check will automatically get you that additional top off of $600 a week. So it's going to be worth it, at least through July 31st, when the $600 supplement will end unless it's extended, to be able to tap into even a little bit of partial unemployment, because that will get you the $600 a week on top of whatever your weekly benefit is. And I wanted to say that this supplement is taxable income, not just the supplement. Your unemployment benefits are taxable. You have an option to select to have taxes taken out as you're getting it, or to pay them at the end of the year. But this supplement, this $600 supplement, will not count for many of our health programs, Medicaid or children's health insurance programs, so that people should be able to keep their health care during this period. So how do you access unemployment benefits? We have at the Child Care Law Center gotten so many calls from family child care providers saying that they are unable to get through to EDD, or they actually did file a claim and they were finally told that they have zero wages, as I mentioned. Now is the time, as soon as the new application is up, to apply again. Just to give you a sense, many of you know that there have been 22 million unemployment claims nationwide since the pandemic began, and in California, 2.3 million new claims in the past 3 weeks. So while our EDD is trying to ramp up and meet this new surge in unemployment claims, they are swamped. And so you be persistent, and when you do get paid, when your benefits finally do arrive, you will get them retroactive to your date of eligibility. And that date of eligibility, again, will be when you were first out of work or had reduced income, and it can go back as early as the first week of February. And then for the $600 supplement, it can go back as early as March 29 if you were out of work or underemployed at that point. So this next piece of advice is to say, get your tax returns completed, either last year's or this year's. We all know that you've been given tax relief where nobody has to file their taxes until June this year. And in addition, if you go to the California Franchise Tax Board website, you'll see that there's been a temporary relief for sales taxes and estimated taxes and other obligations that you might have right now. But the advantage of getting your tax return done is that you will also make sure that you get the $1,200 stimulus check, which is available for every individual who has work authorization. It is not available for ITIN filers. And there's $500 per child as well. Yeah. And the most automatic way that those payments are going out is through your tax returns. Let's see. If I could go to the next slide, thank you. So there is another program that's available. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about what some centers and center directors could and staff can be thinking about. In addition to staff being eligible for unemployment, if they're no longer working or at substantially reduced wages, EDD has a fairly special program that I think is underutilized called work sharing. And it allows you to reduce everyone's hours somewhere between 10 and 60%. So let's say you say, I can't keep all of you at full employment, but I could reduce everyone to 60%. And that would mean that nobody is getting fully laid off. And we all know that in the ECE world, how important it is to keep and retain good trained staff, qualified staff, and that by doing a work sharing where you're not actually laying anybody off, you are keeping them in your work pool for when you then are able to come back up to full capacity. From the worker's perspective, it's a very advantageous program because you continue to have part-time wages and you get a supplement, an unemployment supplement, based on the percentage that you are working. So if my full unemployment benefit would be $400 and I'm working 75%, I would get 75% of that $400 or $300 plus the $600 supplement. So you can see that it's going to buffer the loss of income for your staff in very important ways. And it allows you as an employer to make sure that everyone is taken care of and has adequate income while you're waiting to restore their full benefits and wages. And unlike the normal unemployment, there is no reduction in the unemployment benefit based on the wages that you are receiving. There's, in the resources page that we have at the end of this PowerPoint, there is a link to the EDD work sharing application form. And so employers can get a lot of technical advice and information from EDD about how the program works. Sharon?
Okay, great. So I'm now going to talk about paid leave benefits that are available to people who aren't able to work for reasons related to COVID-19. And last month, Congress passed the first ever paid sick and paid leave law on the federal level, which was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This law included two key provisions for workers at companies with less than 500 employees, and it will be in effect through the end of this year. And it provides two main benefits. The first is 2 weeks of emergency paid sick days, and the second is 12 weeks of emergency paid school closure leave. Next slide, please. So, starting with the emergency paid sick leave, I want to talk about the various reasons that employees can take paid sick leave under this new federal law. You can take these 2 weeks for yourself if you need to be quarantined or in isolation. That also includes people who are subject to a government ordered stay at home or shelter in place order. You can take it if you've been advised by your healthcare provider to self-quarantine, if you have symptoms of COVID-19 and you're seeking diagnosis, if you're caring for someone else who is subject to quarantine or isolation order or advised to self-quarantine, if you're caring for a child whose school or place of care has closed or care provider is now unavailable because of COVID-19. And then the law also authorized the Secretary of Health and Human Services to identify other reasons that people could take this leave. And in terms of how much money you can get while you're taking paid sick days under this law, it depends on the reasons that you're taking the leave. So if you're taking it for your own health or for yourself, then you get 100% pay up to a maximum of $511 per day. If you're taking it to care for somebody else, either someone who's sick or quarantined, or for your child whose school is closed, then you only get 2/3 pay up to a maximum of $200 a day. Now, this leave is paid directly by the employer, but the employer is going to get 100% reimbursement via a refundable tax credit from the federal government. There are some exemptions. So employers who are healthcare providers or emergency responders can claim an exemption to this requirement. And then small employers with fewer than 50 employees can also claim an exemption if they can show that giving the leave would jeopardize the viability of their business. So the second main component of this law is that it provided up to 12 weeks of job protected, partially paid leave when employees cannot work because their children's school has closed or place of care has closed because of COVID-19. The first 2 weeks of these 12 weeks are unpaid, but you can actually use the 2 weeks of emergency paid sick leave to cover those 2 weeks. The following 10 weeks are paid at the same 2/3 rate, up to $200 a day. In order to be eligible for this leave, you have to have worked for your employer for 30 days. And the same exemptions that I mentioned before apply for this leave. And I want to note just that with regard to the exemptions for emergency paid sick leave for the small employers, that exemption only applies when someone is taking leave because of school closure. Small employers do not have an exemption available to them if someone is taking leave for their own health or because they're subject to a quarantine or isolation order or to care for someone else who's sick. And there's another special exemption for the school closure leave, which is that if you're a very small employer with fewer than 25 employees, you may not be required to reinstate someone as long as you make certain best efforts and notify people of available jobs when they become available. So moving on, I mentioned that this was the first federal law, but that we have a number of laws on the books in localities throughout California, and we have a statewide paid sick days law. So I just want to note these laws as well. In California, our sick days law requires employers to provide a minimum of 3 days, which is not very much, but that's the law that applies to employers in California. In a variety of localities throughout California, employers have to provide more. For example, San Francisco, it's up to 9 days. And then it's important to note that some cities have passed and more are considering emergency paid sick leave laws that would fill the gaps left by the federal program. Importantly, paid sick days laws are paid by the employer. The employer cannot retaliate against employees for taking paid sick days or requesting paid sick days. And this is a separate entitlement from the federal emergency paid sick leave that I mentioned. So a person could take their emergency paid sick days from the Families First federal law, and they would still have their entitlement to state and local paid sick days separately. So we are also very, very fortunate in California to have wage replacement programs for when people cannot work for their own illness or disability or because they need to care for someone. So I want to talk a little bit about those programs. And these are, again, kind of rare. There's only a handful of states, there's growing number of states, but that have these kinds of programs on the books. And state disability insurance in California has been around for a long time, since the 1940s, and it provides up to 52 weeks of worker-funded partial wage replacement benefits while an employee cannot perform their job due to their own illness or disability. It covers having COVID-19 or having been exposed to COVID-19. So people can receive these benefits as long as they've paid in. And you know if you've paid in if on your pay stub it shows a deduction for CA, SDI, or something along those lines. It does require a medical certification, and so you will need to, in order to apply for these benefits, at least have a virtual meeting with a physician who can certify your need for these benefits. And it can also apply even if you've been laid off or if you've been terminated from your job, as long as you meet the other criteria. Again, there's a base period similar to unemployment. So if you've paid in during that base period to this program, then you will be eligible. People who've been misclassified as contractors may not have been, they wouldn't have been paying in, but there is a process to seek benefits for misclassified workers at the Employment Development Department. Usually there's a 1-week waiting period for these benefits, but again, the governor has waived that waiting period. So you can get benefits for the first week that you are out of work because of your own illness or disability. Importantly, unlike unemployment insurance, state disability insurance is available regardless of citizenship or immigration status. Next slide, please. Okay, and now I want to talk about California's paid family leave program, which is actually an extension of our state disability insurance program. It's the same fund that funds both of these programs. So if you've paid into one, then you're going to be eligible for the other. And this provides 6 weeks of, again, worker-funded partial wage replacement while you are caring for someone who is seriously ill, or it also covers bonding with a newborn, adopted, or foster child. As of July 1, the program will be extended to 8 weeks per year of benefits. And you'll note the list of family members on this slide that you can take care of while receiving these benefits. So it's parents, spouses, registered domestic partners, siblings, parents-in-law, grandparents, and grandchildren. And again, you can use these benefits to care for someone who has COVID-19 or who's been exposed and is quarantined. Again, you can use it if you've been laid off. Certification is required for that family member in order for you to get benefits, but telehealth visits are okay. And for both these benefits, SDI and paid family leave, the benefit level is 60 or 70% of your normal wages, depending on your income. People who are very low wage earners will get the 70%, everybody else will get 60%. There is no waiting period for paid family leave. And again, citizenship and immigration status is irrelevant. And then I also wanted to mention that there's a number of laws in California that provide job protection. So we've been talking about laws that provide pay. Some of the laws that we mentioned already provide pay and job protection, like the paid sick leave and the extended FMLA leave for school closures. There are also some other laws in California that provide job protection but no pay, that can often be used at the same time as you're getting these other forms of pay. So the first is the California Family Rights Act, and this is our state's version of the federal FMLA, or Family Medical Leave Act. It provides up to 12 weeks of job protected leave per year to eligible employees. To be eligible, you have to have been on the job for a year. You have to work for a fairly large employer with at least 50 employees when you're taking it for yourself or to care for someone. And continued health benefits are required. So for this law, you can take it for yourself if you're seriously ill. You can take it to care for a more limited set of family members, which appear on the slide. So parents, spouses, registered domestic partners and minor children or adult dependent children. The second law I wanted to mention is the Fair Employment and Housing Act, or the which is our state version of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that's a law that protects workers with disabilities, and it includes a requirement that employers provide reasonable accommodations for employees who themselves have a disability, which and those accommodations can include time off with job protection. And it can also include part-time work, modified schedules, remote work. A number of accommodations may be available if the employee herself has a disability. Having, a disability can include having COVID-19 if it's serious enough, if your symptoms are serious enough. And then finally, there is a law called the Family School Partnership Act that provides 40 hours of leave when your school or daycare is closed or your care provider is unavailable due to an emergency. I'll pass it back to Patty.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the money and grants and loans that has been made available through the CARES Act. And there's been a lot of press about this money and a lot of confusion about who is eligible for which form of the money and who it applies to. So I'm going to start with the economic injury disaster loans, and they are up to they can be converted to a grant as an advance if you are qualified, and you apply through your local small business loan program. We've left a link at the end of the slide to where those are. The problem is that because so many small businesses across the country and in California are in free fall right now, that the money is already gone. And there's talk of replenishing that fund, but it has not yet happened. You can get up to $10,000. It's $1,000 per employee. And one of the problems that I know family childcare providers and other small employer centers face is often they don't actually have themselves on the payroll, that they might pay themselves at the end of the year through what's left or through their tax return. You can see what their income was, but they don't have a standard payroll that you can use. And this has been a problem in applying for these loans that can be turned into grants, is how do you document the number of employees you had on your payroll as of January 1st of this year. And the grants are available. They are the economic injury grants that are part of this loan program. They provide an emergency advance of up to $10,000 to small businesses and private nonprofits that have been harmed by COVID-19. And you can get this advance within 3 days of applying for the economic injury disaster loan. But as I said, the problem is that it's very hard for small employers to get through, and right now the money is gone. If you do qualify for one of these payments, these grants, you can use it to keep your workers on payroll, to pay for sick leave, to pay for business obligations, which would include rent and mortgage. The next program that got a lot of fanfare when it was announced is the Payroll Protection Act. And this was Congress's attempt to say, we want to incentivize employers to keep their workers on payroll even while they don't necessarily have enough work for them to do. And the problems with these grants are that you have to apply through banks, and many family childcare providers have contacted the Child Care Law Center to say either they don't have a relationship with a bank that is administering this program, or they're told that they have to have a business account, and many family child care providers only have a personal account. And the business account has to have been established before February 1st. So there's been a lot of barriers to family child care providers being able to access this money. You have to use this money, use at least 75% of it to either keep or rehire workers. So it can be used if you had to temporarily close and then you reopen. And there are provisions about how the remaining money should be used as well. And if it doesn't get used in these ways that are permitted, then it is a loan with a fairly low interest amount. Again, that fund has also run out of money as of, I think, Wednesday. So we are hoping that more money will be appropriated. And the other one that has already been mentioned, Sharon talked about the employers who provide paid sick leave or family leave, that there are these tax credits which allow you to get a tax credit that is equal to 100% of your paid sick leave that you provided, or paid family leave. I think the problem again is for many family child care providers or centers, they either don't have enough of a tax obligation, and they also, if they're a nonprofit, might not have any tax obligation that would be refunded to them. One thing that is clear, and this question has come up a lot in the question and answer, is that we all know that your experience rating as an employer can be affected by the number of unemployment claims you have against you. And in the Federal CARES Act, it was made clear that the federal unemployment benefits will not be charged to the employer's unemployment experience rated account. That is not true for the state benefits, but it is true for the federal benefits. And somebody asked if any of these leave laws that Sharon described apply to employers less than 50 employees, and many of them did. And if you look at the slides, which we'll be providing to you, you'll see that most of the federal leave laws and many of California's will apply. And I'll let Sharon say a little more about that if she wants to. I think when people are calling the Child Care Law Center and asking, what do I do? There are all these programs. I don't know which one to go for, and I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. I think the message from this webinar is, right now, unemployment benefits for those who are out of work or temporarily furloughed is definitely the best way to go. And it's available to your workers, and it's available to family child care providers who are themselves self-employed or business owners. And if you are partially employed, then there's a mix of things that you might want to use. You could use your unemployment. You could use some of the leave provisions that Sharon has described based on the reason why you are out of work. And we want to make sure that people know that you can apply for multiple things and see what you get. One of the concerns that has been raised by family child care providers is that I received a continuation payment for the children who are not attending. Does that make me ineligible for unemployment? And the answer is no, it does not make you ineligible. You are still eligible for unemployment. You may have to, you will have to report the income that you received, and it may be that you are eligible for a partial unemployment. But you don't have to choose between getting a subsidy payment that allows you to be paid for 2 children instead of 12 and getting unemployment. You can apply, you can receive both as long as you report that income. So we want to make sure that everyone knows that family childcare providers, self-employed business people, and many workers who are traditionally excluded from the unemployment provisions can qualify for pandemic unemployment assistance. They will also get the $600 week supplement. And that includes religious workers, people who didn't have enough base period wages, perhaps people who didn't pay into unemployment. That's been a question that's come up a lot. They will still qualify if they can show that they are out of work due to COVID-19. This is a very hard time to be applying for benefits. Don't give up, be persistent. And in our resource page, you'll see that there's a phone number for legal aid at work, which has workers' rights clinics. If you are denied benefits, have questions about any of the programs that we've talked about on this morning's webinar, that's a great number to call. In addition, Childcare Law Center has information and FAQ on all these benefits and has a online help portal that you can use where we can answer more specific questions. It's not your job to understand the complexities of all these programs, and the rules about them are still emerging. Sometimes we don't know the answer. It's just important that you get the application in at this point. And I think because the program guidance and the information about how to apply for these benefits keeps changing, keep checking our websites as well as EDD and the Small Business Administration and other websites that can help you understand how to access these important benefits so you can do the work that you do. Thank you. So I'm just going to briefly go over what we have put into this resources page, and these, when you get them in your email, they'll arrive with hot links so that you can go right to the site, we hope. The first is EDD has put up a page about pandemic unemployment assistance. I am guessing, and I'm not quite sure, that once they put up their application for pandemic unemployment assistance on April 28th, there will be a link to that application form on that pandemic unemployment assistance page. Childcare Law Center has a whole COVID-19 resources page. We started out with 7 questions and answers. I think we're now up to 35. We keep updating them as information becomes available, and we hope that that will answer a lot of questions for providers, for families, for centers. They address everything from health and safety to the subsidy payments, and you can find your answers to many of the questions that you've raised today there. And Legal Aid at Work has some terrific resources on unemployment insurance in general, as well as questions that have come up specific to the coronavirus and your need to take time off work or to be able to come to work. And then I mentioned the work sharing application for employers who want to consider providing partial benefits to all their employees or most of their employees rather than laying off a set number of them. This next one is just a list, a very comprehensive list of emergency disaster relief that's available for undocumented workers and families. I think we'll continue to add to this. Legal Aid at Work has put it on their website. There are many funds that are available through private philanthropy and other local and community-based governmental and private organizations. On paid leave, the benefits for workers impacted by COVID-19 is a publication from our state Department of Workforce and Development, and it gives you a nice side-by-side comparison of all the different leave provisions. And here's this great phone number, don't lose this, for the leave workers' rights clinics. And finally, we have some additional information about the Small Business Owner's Guide to the CARES Act funding, the grants and loans, and how to find your local small business organization that can help you with that process.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Crow. I'm the Managing Director of the First Five Center for Children's Policy. Thank you to Sharon and Patty for that incredibly rich and informative presentation, and thank you all for joining us today. We did receive many, many questions from you all when you registered. We went through them. We hoped that we answered many of them, as Sharon and Patty did during the course of their presentation today. We have time just for a couple of questions here we'll get through really quickly. Before I turn back to Patty and Sharon with those questions, I just want to flag for you all that there is a First Five County Commission in every county in California. Those county commissions help to coordinate, promote, and fund programs and services for children 0 to 5 and their families. Those First Fives, along with your local resource and referral agency, may be a resource to you during these times and in calmer times as well. Okay, so again, thank you all for the questions. The first one that I'll pull from the very long list that we received is one that we heard a bunch of times. What if I'm earning less than usual because there are fewer children in my care? Is there some sort of help for me? Patty, do you want to take that really quickly?
Sure, and I'm assuming that is coming from a family childcare provider who is the owner of her own business. And as we've talked about, she is going to be eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance, and she will be able to get benefits based on what her partial earnings are, plus the $600 supplement for each week that she has these reduced earnings. And whether the reason for her reduced earnings is because she has only 2 children who are paying, or whether she has only 2 children for whom she's receiving subsidy payments regardless of attendance, that is the earned income that she would have to report, and she would be eligible for unemployment to supplement those partial earnings. And I haven't mentioned, but the other person in the family childcare situation who can apply for unemployment is, of course, any assistants that large family childcare providers have hired would also be eligible for unemployment, and they do not need to wait for April 28th because they are employees.
Thank you, Patty. We're at time now. Patricia, should we do any more questions or should we wrap it up at this point?
Well, it's 11 o'clock, so I want to respect everybody's time, but I want to reassure all participants that they will receive the PowerPoint, the recordings of the webinar, and also we'll work on translating the PowerPoint. And please check all the resources that Patty shared, where all of your questions may be answered. And I want to thank you all who participated. I want to thank Patty, Sharon, and Sarah for putting this together and sharing this amazing resource with you all. And I hope and I thank you again for all your hard work. And please reach out if you have any other questions, and we will help as much as we can. Thank you all.